Salutations, ladies and gentlemen, the Streaming Enderman here, back again with another video. And in today's video, the long-awaited Buck 112. Now, I have been planning on talking about this knife for quite some time, a few weeks actually, and I only got around to it now. So this is a late video, but for those who stuck around and waited, well, this video's for you, and anyone else who happens to have found it. So the Buck 112. This is a very interesting knife, and it's something different for me. Normally I buy small, lightweight, traditional knives. You know, something along the lines of an Opinel or a case. But this, while it is a traditional knife, is definitely not small nor lightweight. This is a very beefy knife, and it's one of the heaviest knives I own. Now, I was hesitant to get this knife for this very reason. It's different from what I normally purchase and use. But I'm kind of happy I did. I had to choose between the Buck 110 and 112 here. And I went with the 112 for a variety of reasons. Now, granted, both are very iconic knives, but the 112 is a lot more comfortable in my hand. Now, some people with larger hands might disagree and say the 110 is better, but it all comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. I chose the 112 because it was more comfortable, and I found that the craftsmanship on the model I purchased was a lot better than the craftsmanship on the 110. Because remember, these are, while they do go through a bit of a factory process, at the end of the day, there is still a lot of hand labor involved in creating these knives. So that's why I went with the 112. This does not mean I will never get a 110. It just means that I'm going to have to wait a little longer, because I think this one's good for now. So we'll quickly talk about the sheath before getting into the knife itself. Classic black leather buck sheath. Got the logo, the brass. Very nice belt loop. This is the best way to carry this knife if you intend to use it like a pocket knife, although very large and cumbersome. It is not comfortable in any pocket, trust me. Even the largest pockets I have, really, the knife is quite heavy and it will weigh down your pocket, and it's not very comfortable to carry. But the belt sheath does support it quite well and takes a lot of the weight away from the knife. It feels a lot better to carry. So that is included with the knife. For those who are interested, the box. This is the newer model with the genuine ebony. But in the meantime, let's talk about this knife. So, I've been carrying this pretty frequently. It has become my go-to hard-use knife, as it really was intended for that. This isn't a small pocket knife that they made so that you could keep with you everywhere and use to peel apples. Granted, it could. But this is more of a small hunting knife slash hard-use, heavy-duty kind of knife. And it does both of these things very, very well. I'm no hunter, but from the sources I have found, this is just as good a hunting knife as a lot of fixed blades. The 110 is better due to its larger size, but that doesn't mean this would not be quite good at small game hunting. But I don't hunt, so I can't give you experience from that background, but for the harder use, everyday work knife, I could shed a bit more light on that. So, to start, the craftsmanship is fairly good. This is one of my better buck knives. Now, granted, when I first got this, the brass was very shiny. It was very polished, but after being carried and used, you can see it tarnishes pretty easily, and it gets that aged patina on it. Quite akin to the patina that will be found on carbon steel bladed knives. So, this kind of dark film that forms over time. But, of course, patina and tarnish are not flaws. They're just the natural process of the material. Give it a wipe down, polish it, and it will be as good as new. It will shine just like it did when you first get it. So, brass pins, liners, and bolsters, stainless steel back lock, a 420HC satin finished clip point blade with a very nicely done swedge. You can see there is a swedge on the front of the knife. The nail nick, which is the method for opening it. Very nice lockup, very sturdy. And you can see nice thick slabs of genuine ebony hardwood with a very, very simple but very, very classy grain pattern found on lots of traditional woods. So, the overall length of this knife, when opened, comes in at roughly just a little bit over 7 inches. So I know this probably will be illegal in some areas, but in others it will be perfectly fine if you live in a place where locking knives are allowed, provided they're under a certain blade length, and this may or may not be legal. Again, don't ask me if your knife is legal or illegal. Only consult your local laws and the people who make them. Don't try to get me to tell you, because I am not well versed enough in such matters. And about 4 1/4 inches when closed. So that means you get a rough blade length of just a tiny bit over 3 inches, including the unsharpened bit. And if you're not including the unsharpened bit, you're getting about 2 3/4, actually just under 2 3/4 inches. So this blade, provided you can have a locking knife, if there's a country, I know the UK, 3-inch knives are 3-inch and over knives are prohibited for carrying. Now granted, lock blades are too, but if you could carry a lock blade in another country, but it has to be under 3 inches, this would be perfect, because this would just fall under that requirement. You could argue that the unsharpened bit could be counted and then the knife would be illegal, but again, take your own risks. I don't know if I would want to risk that, because, a police officer could be a jerk and count that as part of the blade, and then you're going to get in trouble. But either way, in the US and Canada, this is a very legal knife. It is allowed. It is not an automatic knife. There's no centrifugal force. So you should be pretty A-okay to carry this. Now, enough with the length and such. This is a very thick knife. You have about 2 millimeters for blade thickness, which is quite decent when it comes to blade thickness. For example, if you compare that to the incredibly skinny blade that is found on the Opinel, you can see that these are two very different knives in style. This is a hard use knife. This is a lightweight, everyday carry knife. But in the meantime, the weight on this is one of the most notable things about it. As I said earlier, this is not a knife you want to carry in the pocket, as it will weigh you down and it won't be very comfortable. However, if you carry it in the sheath, it's not that bad. For most people, I think this would be a decent size to carry, and the weight to some could be a downside, but for me, if you're carrying a knife with the sole intention of having a tough, hard use knife, I think that the added extra weight makes it feel more secure in the hand. Which brings us to the next point that I absolutely adore about this knife. The ergonomics are immaculate. Now, you can buy a modern knife. You can buy a Spyderco, a Kershaw, a Benchmade, or, something very premium like a Custom or a Rockstead. And you can get all of these fancy patterns of jimping and finger grooves and textured handles and such, but you will never be able to replace the absolutely rock solid grip that you get with this knife. Yes, there's brass. Yes, there is wood. It's not a textured material, and you could argue that it will slip out of your hand, but this is still one of the most solid knives I have ever handled. Ever. And there are very few knives that come anywhere close to this level of security. Truly, the lockback here, again, most people have seen a lockback. It's a time-tested design that, if done correctly, and Buck certainly has enough time to be able to say that they have perfected the lockback, if done correctly, this is absolutely solid. This is a perfect lockup. Normally, even on my lock blades, I don't push on the blade like this for fear that I might harm the lock or accidentally disengage the mechanism, and I would certainly never do this on a slip joint knife. But you can see the color of my finger. Look at that. My finger is turning. The front of my thumb is turning white because of the amount of force I am putting on this blade, and it isn't budging. There are a lot of lock blades that I have, and even though I know that they are technically supposed to be safe, none of them would I ever apply this much pressure onto, for fear that they will disengage and then the blade will slam down on my hand. This is a completely different case. I have never handled a knife that I feel more secure using and abusing than this one. Out of all my folders, this is still my go-to choice if I have to, say, go hiking in the forest and I might need to cut something like a chunk of wood. This would be my favorite pick for any tasks that are too severe for something along the lines of my Opinel. And I believe that Buck has mastered this style of knife. The traditional lock blade, they still make these. These have been around since the late 1960s, I believe. And they were introduced a couple of years after the 110 Folding Hunter. And a little bit of a story behind this. You can fact check me. You can look up this story elsewhere. I believe that the current owner of Buck actually told this story himself. But at one point, there was a U.S. Marine ship, and the Marines got into a fight, and the 110 Folding Hunter was used in said fight as a weapon. And because of that, there was a ban on locking knives of a certain blade length, I presume 3 inches or more. So Buck, realizing that their 110 could no longer be carried, and realizing that the Marines would no longer have the incredible reliability of the 110, they decided to make the 112 Ranger, which does actually come in under 3 inches and would be fine to carry. And since then, they supplied the Marines with these, and I believe they were in service for quite some time. I don't believe they carry them anymore, but someone can correct me if you know otherwise. But ever since then, this has become probably Buck's second most popular folding knife, of course after the 110. And I have to say, I don't have a 110, but from the little I've handled it compared to the 112 here, I like the 112 better. Now, there is a design that the 112 has, and it's this front bolster here. This is known as a copperhead bolster, and if you own a case copperhead or any old traditional company, and you happen to have a knife called a copperhead or a copper lock, you will know that this shape is called a copperhead, and that's what gives the knife its name. And because of this little groove here it makes it less likely that you'll snag the blade when you're pulling it out of your pocket. Now, granted, this isn't a problem if you're carrying this knife in a sheath, but still, it makes it less likely to get caught, and then you will accidentally get it hooked on your pocket, and it'll just be harder to get out. But that's what this is supposed to do. Now, granted, I've seen better executions of this, and I don't think that's what Buck was intending to do. I think it was just their design choice, because if they really wanted to make a knife that reduces pocket snag, they could have tucked the blade even deeper into here. So I don't think that's what they were going for, but that is what the shape is. Now, let me tell you, this area right here is the most snug fit for your finger. It goes in there, and you just wrap your hand around the full body of the knife, and it is incredibly secure. Now, a design trait I know a lot of people dislike for Buck knives, and this is not a flaw, the pins stick out. Now, I've seen some knife collectors, some, probably self-designated professionals. They have complained about this, and they have said that this is something that Buck should not be doing, and if it is a flaw, they should fix it, and if it's not, they should change their design. I wholeheartedly and completely disagree. Now, if you have a knife, say a small traditional pocket knife, like my GEC White Owl here, the pins should be nice and smooth. But that's because this knife is, you can carry this, of course, but let's be realistic. This is a traditional knife with a more gentleman's folder style. It is a traditional knife. It's not meant to be threatening. It's not meant to be a hard use knife. It's just meant to be a little everyday carry pocket knife that may be a secondary knife that you keep in your watch pocket, for example. This isn't meant to be a hard use knife where you have a good grip on it. The Buck 112, on the other hand, is meant to be a hard use knife. It is perhaps even meant to be a hunting knife. And these pins that actually stick up, they kind of go into your hand a little bit when you hold it, not uncomfortably, actually quite the opposite. But when you grip the knife like this, you just get this incredible grip that is just so solid in the hand, and I am not remotely afraid of this knife slipping out of my grip. And that is also because of the design of the handle. Your hand isn't going to slide forward because it will get caught here on this area of the bolster, and back here, it's not that likely because, again, the kind of grip you get on this, especially considering these pins that get in the way, it's very unlikely that you'll actually lose your grip on this knife. Unless, of course, you're holding it in a way that is, not very secure, well, then that's your problem. That's not the knife's problem. The overall fit and finish, as I should mention, is quite good. You can see the back, I'd say the back spring, more the back lock. It looks like there's a gap here, but this isn't a gap. This is actually, the lock bar is just a tiny little bit proud. Not much, but it's enough that you might notice if you look. It's a little bit proud there, and because of that, it looks like a gap, but this is no gap. It's not that the construction is bad, it's just that this sits up a tiny bit, and because of that, it looks like there's a gap there, but aside from that, there's no gapping. The transitions from the brass to the ebony are very good. This, of course, doesn't count in this situation, but the pins do stick up. If you absolutely hate that no matter what, then you won't like this knife, or any Buck knife, really. The centering is surprisingly dead on. This is absolutely perfect. None of the pins wobble. The scales are very tightly secured. Again, I really like the thick pieces of ebony you get here. They really don't chintz on handle material. And I know some people, side note, some people hate tarnished brass. They always want it to be shiny. But as long as you have some polish, you can keep it shiny. You don't need to worry about it tarnishing if you just take care of it. Same way that if you hate patinas, you just put oil on your knife and don't let the color change, and if it starts to patina, you just polish it again. So this is entirely preventable, and if you do like your knives aged or tarnished, it doesn't take very long for this to happen. I've had this for a few weeks, and it's been like this easily for a couple weeks now. So I'd say in the span of about 7 days, this went from shiny, brand new looking, to a knife that could have been in use for, a few years. Again, another thing that I should point out is the nail nick is here for opening it. I know some people don't like that. You can easily just pinch it open, and the knife is very secure. It locks up nicely. There's no sharpening choil here, but that's because that's not part of Buck's design. Again, Buck 112. I always thought this was a plus right here. I should mention this. It's a mistake I should correct from my previous Buck videos. This is very close. Camera quality is not great. This is not a plus. It's actually a line with a small line underneath it and then a dot. Now, I never knew what this was originally. So I just said that must be Buck 112 plus. I guess that must have meant some sort of, it had something to do with a serial number or their logo. I didn't know at the time. But what this is it's actually a genius little way of telling how old your Buck knife is. This symbol is featured on every Buck knife, and each time it's slightly different. Now, to compare it with my Buck 55, which is really, when you think about it, a direct downscale from the 112. Same brass, same pins, same ebony wood, same steel, which is 420HC, same design, just a very downscaled version. This is a very nice little pocket knife. Doesn't come with a sheath. Very, very nice. A little less solid feeling. I wouldn't push on the lock as much as I would with this one. But this knife has a similar mark. However, this is a line, and then half a line to the right, and 2 small dots. Sorry, I was wrong. It's a line down, a line to the side, and then a dot. As opposed to, on this one, it's a line down, a line underneath, and then a dot. Now, they're very hard to see, but if you go on Buck's website, there's actually a chart where you can identify the date of when these were made. And as it turns out, this knife was made in 2020. If you go on the website, this symbol appears on all 2020 models, and this knife was made in 2020. This one, 2021. So if you do that, you can tell just how old your Buck knife is. And this was very helpful once I discovered this for my Buck 505 Knight, which is a discontinued model. And when I checked what the symbol on this one meant, it's again hard to see, this one was a 2012 release. So a lot older than I had expected, considering it was in brand new condition and was bought new at a store. But that aging chart is something I figured I should mention. It's a lot simpler than Case or even GEC's chart, for example. Case, you have the little dots and little stars, and their logo changes every decade, and they remove a star with each year. I could see that getting confusing. Now, granted, I can't memorize all of these, because there's a different symbol for each knife all the way back from when Buck was founded to the present day. So, of course, I can't remember all of the symbols, but if you kind of get the chart, it's pretty easy to see what year your knife was made, and I think that's an interesting idea. Blade play, side to side, non-existent. Blade play up and down, absolutely non-existent. You can see that the transition from the spring, or should I say the lock, to the blade is a little bit messy. Could be better. I still think that doesn't matter, because this is a work knife. It's not meant to be pretty for the eye. It's not meant to be something shoved on a shelf. This is a knife that you're going to use, and if you're holding it like I am, you don't even see that, as your thumb would be in the way, depending, of course, on how you use it. But again, very strong lock, very nice little click when you open it, incredibly solid, great stamping, it's very easy to read, incredibly sharp, factory edge, nice swedge up here. Again, the brass you can polish or you can let patina. Nice thick pieces of wood, makes for an excellent grip, and just great lockup and performance overall. And you get your sheath. So that's it for the fit and finish and the specifications and the materials used for this knife. So let's move on to comparisons with some other buck lockbacks. I don't have a 110, unfortunately, so I can't show you the comparison with the 110, but I do have a knife that's a little bit closer to the 112, which is the 501. This knife is quite different. It uses nickel silver for the bolsters and features a drop point blade, as opposed to brass with a clip point blade. And of course, this has genuine ebony. Well, this has a more resin wood, redwood for the handle. Next one down, very close to the 112, is the 55. Again, clip point and brass and ebony. Clip point brass and ebony, very close. You can see this is the largest buck lock blade I own, followed by the 501, followed by the 55, and then finally, again, drop point, nickel silver and redwood on the discontinued 505 Knight, which is the smallest buck lock blade to date and the smallest one that I own. So 505, 55, 501, 112. And actually, I almost have a complete collection of all the models that Buck makes for lock blades. The only ones I'm missing are the 503 Prince, which is one skill down from the Squire. Then after the Squire, the 500 Duke, which is just a tiny bit smaller than the 112, and then finally, the largest one is the 110 Folding Hunter. So all I need is the 110, the 500, which is unfortunately a discontinued model, harder to find, and the 503. And when I have those, I will have a complete Buck lock blade collection of this particular series. So, may not happen anytime soon, especially considering the Duke is hard to find, but maybe one day I will have a complete collection of Buck lock blades. So, this knife was not the most expensive Buck I have ever purchased. I believe it still was overshadowed by the 119 Special. That does not mean it was necessarily cheap. Definitely not expensive or custom price range, but at the same time, definitely not budgety like, say, an Opinel. But I'm still very pleased with it. I think this was a great knife. Incredibly good, hard use, beautiful lockup, excellent blade. The Paul Boss heat treatment on the 420HC steel makes it a wonder to use. Easy to sharpen, very, very sharp when you actually do give it a strop or a few minutes with the sharpening stone. It can serve you very well if you take care of it, and it has decent corrosion resistance. So, nice steel, definitely not super steel, but definitely not bad. Love the brass, even though some people may not like that it would weigh down the knife quite a bit. Beautiful ebony wood, pins that help make the knife more secure. Very sturdy blade, very nice fit and finish, very authoritative thwack when the knife opens and closes. Definitely not a knife that will let you down in the field. So if you want this knife as a hunting knife, I think it's great. If you want it as a outdoor knife, I think that's great. If you want it as a work knife, you work somewhere where you're breaking down a lot of boxes, this is a great knife. And I may not be the kind of person who'd go out in the woods and abuse this knife for, hours. I probably would use it for lighter tasks even then. But still, I can see the potential in this knife, and I'm sure a lot of people who've used it and abused it before me have seen that too, and that's why they enjoy this knife so much. It's time-tested, it's made in America, they have a wonderful warranty. If you have any problem with your knife, even if you abuse it, I've seen cases where people have used their knives as pry bars and screwdrivers, which Buck tells you not to do. And even people who have done this and have broken their blades have sent them in, and Buck will fix them or give them a new knife. And their warranty is amazing. So, amazing warranty, lovely family-run company. Still a Buck family member is still in charge. So it's a family business with an excellent warranty, excellent customer service, really good craftsmanship, incredibly strong, not a knife that will let you down. And if you want this knife, I think that this is a great choice for a kind of a cross between an everyday carry because of its smaller blade shape and a hard use knife because of its just thickness and its grippiness. So it's a good combo of everyday carry and hard use knife. If you want something a bit more hard use or like a hunting knife, but you still want a folder, 110. If you want something a bit smaller, go for the 500 or the 501. If you want something even smaller still, go for the 503 or the 55. And if you want a very small knife, but still want that classic buck lockback, if you can find one, go with the 505. But in the meantime, that's all for now. I really like this knife, and I think you will love it too. Sorry this review took so long, and sorry that it has such a long runtime. I wouldn't be surprised if 99% of people watching it skip through most of it. But for those who made it to the end, thank you again for watching. Hope this has been helpful to you. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. Share this video if you think anyone else might be interested. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this type of content. Thank you very much for watching. This has been the Buck 112 Ranger, and this is the Streaming Enderman, as always, signing off. Goodbye.